Elon Musk has done a lot to boost cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Dogecoin. But suddenly he's on the other side of the trade, joking about Dogecoin being a hustle on Saturday Night Live, and then reversing his decision to accept Bitcoin in payment for Teslas. We talked with Gillian Tett, chair of the editorial board and editor-at-large U.S. for the Financial Times, and Peter Kraus, CEO of Aperture Investors, about whether the setbacks are just a blip or reflect something deeper.
In a nutshell, well, duh, because we have warned at the Financial Times now for many months that cryptocurrency is filthy. And there's really just two key stats you need to know to understand why. Firstly, about 70% of cryptocurrency has been mined using the computer algorithms in China, overwhelmingly using Chinese coal, mostly in the west of the country. And secondly, the sector has grown so rapidly that it now has a carbon footprint people calculate around the size of, say, Sweden. And that is worrying. I mean, there have been any number of activists, scientists, investors pointing this out and pointing out the tremendous irony that Tesla has been branded as ESG friendly, good for environmental, social, and governance, even while it's got this filthy footprint in Bitcoin.
So Peter, there's more than a little irony here, right? Because at least we tend to think of people who tend to invest in crypto as being very environmentally conscious, and it turns out they may be polluting the environment, warming up, emitting a lot of greenhouse gases.
Yeah, look, I mean, we spend an enormous amount of time every week trying to think about ESG conscious investing. We design investment processes. We have information and data. We look to inquire as to management's views on ESG and how they deal with those different conditions. And investors are demanding, in particular in Europe, but all over the world, investment portfolios that are ESG friendly and, in fact, even ESG compliant with some of the new regulations in Europe. So it is, in fact, a paradox for investors to be investing in Bitcoin, which is exactly the opposite of that. Not even close. And more interesting, to Gillian's point, if it continues to grow, the exponential effect on the poor use of energy, coal, dirty energy, is palpable. And so I find it, kind of almost humorous that people are investing in Bitcoin thinking that they're doing something that's exciting, and at the same time, they're acting in exactly the opposite way that they want the rest of the world to behave.
So Gillian, that says one thing to people who want to buy or hold cryptocurrencies. What does it say for the big banks? Because the big banks are getting some pressure, actually, to manage some funds that actually would include some crypto in it. We have JP Morgan, for example, this week coming out and said, we're really going to get to zero emissions. Everyone wants to get to zero emissions. If they really want to do that, does that mean they can't hold crypto?
Regulators clearly need to start getting involved. I mean, the reason why someone like Elon Musk can have almost this Wizard of Oz-like effect on the crypto market is because it's opaque and unregulated and probably highly concentrated in its holdings. And there are efforts underway now amongst the regulators to exert more oversight, not just over the questions of market manipulation, but also money laundering. And frankly, every single big bank who's dealing with crypto or thinking about it, and fund managers, whether it's Fidelity or Goldman Sachs, needs to throw their weight around it, behind this process big time. And ironically, green issues might turn out to be the issue that causes everyone to rally together, even the libertarians.
I just want to jump in on something to just inject another idea into the conversation. There are two issues around cryptocurrencies. One is the mining issue, which creates the sort of scarcity value and the desire to actually earn something for producing a new Bitcoin. And that, that's the speculative aspect of Bitcoin and the speculative aspect of cryptocurrency. But the more interesting aspect of cryptocurrency is not the fact that it is a speculative value, but that it's a mechanism by which you can actually trade, settle, and effectively record transactions immediately or instantaneously. That's the much more valuable part of crypto. And you don't need mining exercises and energy utilization in order to go after that. So I think you have to start thinking about unbundling the sort of speculative aspect of crypto, which frankly has no value to it. And now we know it's dirty as it relates to the environment. and the actual value of crypto, which is a currency that settles immediately, instantaneously records a transaction, and lowers the cost of transactions in the world, and is the most valuable part. And so I think this might be, to Gillian's point again, the sort of start of unpeeling the onion between the speculative aspects, which frankly are not that valuable, and what the true value of crypto could be over time.
So Gillian, Peter says you can separate out the immediate settlement on the one hand from the speculative on the other. What about another aspect, which is the complete anonymity, which I think we saw this week in the Colonial Pipeline hack, actually. As we look at all these ransomware attacks, there have been almost 400 in 2020 alone on infrastructure. Could we have those ransomware attacks without crypto? If you had to actually write a check in your banking account, I'm not sure the ransomware would work.
That's a great point, David. And I think the issue is not so much anonymity, but pseudonymity. That basically don't know who lies behind these accounts. You can track these accounts, and oddly enough, some law enforcement officials actually think there's a benefit to having this because they can actually see, once you get inside the system, where accounts are coming from. But pseudonymity is absolutely part of the issue. And again, going back to my point that actually green might provide a spark to actually get community support for more accountability and transparency. If you started to create a register of green versus dirty cryptocurrencies, that's a kind of thing that could actually put this on a more mature footing. One other quick point is worth mentioning, by the way, that this issue about green and tech is cutting right across the tech sector now. I mean, 2 Google AI ethicists were kicked out of their jobs for co-authoring a paper which said, amongst other things, that the machine learning processes that are used in things like search engines are also pretty filthy. And so you're going to see, or rather, they're consuming an awful lot of electricity and energy. So you're going to see more and more questions being asked of tech companies in general beyond crypto in relation to this going forward, I suspect.
So this is a fascinating point, Peter, I had not picked up on, because in general, I think a lot of the ESG funds, so-called, really heavy up on tech, on the assumption that tech is basically clean. What Gillian's saying is that not all tech is created equal, and we're going to have to get a little more sophisticated, Peter.
Yeah, no, and look, I think we obviously operate in the in the investment world, and in Europe in particular, ESG is extremely important. And most buyers of investment products ask the investment teams to be able to actually do detailed diligence on the companies in which they're investing to determine if, in fact, they are operating in clean mechanisms. And most ESG funds that you do see a lot of tech in them. And I do think the point that Gillian is making is a critical one, and one that's going to ultimately differentiate some clean tech versus some dirty tech. And that will have an impact on prices, for sure.